इस समय हम आपको सीधे लिए चलते हैं विदेश मंत्रालय की प्रेस वार्ता में।
For the G7 summit in Apulia, Italy. At the invitation of Honorable Prime Minister of Italy, Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji will be travelling to Apulia, Italy tomorrow to participate in the 50th G7 summit, which is to be held there on 14th of June, that's day after tomorrow, where India has been invited as an outreach country. The visit assumes a significance as this will be Honorable Prime Minister's first overseas travel after assuming office in his third consecutive term. It will also afford him an opportunity to engage with other world leaders present at the G7 summit on issues of importance to India as also to the Global South. This will be India's 11th participation in G7 summit and Prime Minister Modi's 5th consecutive participation at the G7 summit. On 14th of June, that is the main day for the G7 outreach summit, Prime Minister will participate in the outreach session along with the other countries invited for the outreach summit. At this session, the focus would be on artificial intelligence, energy, Africa and the Mediterranean. It will be a block agenda item where the G7 and the outreach countries would share their views and perspective. India's regular participation at the G7 summit clearly points to increasing recognition and contribution of the efforts that India has been consistently making in trying to resolve global challenges, including those of peace, security, development and environment preservation. India's participation at this G7 summit acquires particular salience in context of India's recently held, well, not so recent, presidency of the G20, where India took a leading role in building global consensus on a number of contentious issues. As you are also aware, India has so far organized 2 sessions of the Voice of the Global South Summit, which have been aimed at bringing the interest, priorities and concerns of the Global South on the global stage. At G7 also, we have always brought the issues of Global South to the forefront. The G7 summit under Italian presidency has chosen some key priorities for the current year. In broad terms, these are: first, conflict in Russia, Ukraine, Middle East with its consequences for the global agenda. Secondly, relationship with developing nations and emerging economies with focus on Africa and the Indo-Pacific region. Third, migration together with climate-energy linkages and food security. And last but not least, the artificial intelligence. Prime Minister's participation in the G7 summit would also provide a timely opportunity to follow up on outcomes of the G20 summit held under India's presidency last year and deliberate on issues which are significant for the Global South. On the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy, Prime Minister is also expected to hold bilateral meetings and discussions with the leaders of the G7 as also the outreach countries and the international organizations. As per the information that we have, besides India, Italy as G7 presidency has also invited Algeria, Argentina, Brazil. Brazil is also a member of the G20 Troika, Egypt, Kenya, Mauritania. Mauritania also holds the African Union presidency, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, which is again G20 Troika, Tunisia, Turkey, UAE, and some international organizations, including the United Nations. Honorable Prime Minister is also expected to hold a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy. As you are all aware, the two Prime Ministers last met during the COP28 summit in Abu Dhabi in December 23. If I could take this opportunity to give a brief overview of India-Italy ties, because the exchanges between the two countries have been very intense in the last 1 year. Our ties are strong and multidimensional. As you are aware, Prime Minister of Italy had visited India on a state visit in March last year. You would also recall that she was our chief guest at the Raisina Dialogue in March last year. She thereafter visited New Delhi for the G20 summit. During her state visit, India-Italy relations were upgraded to strategic partnership with focus on defense, Indo-Pacific, energy, science and technology. Italy is also India's fourth largest trading partner in the European Union, with bilateral trade currently standing at $15 billion. We have a large diaspora resident in Italy, close to 200,000. Italy is also a partner in several global initiatives launched by India, including the International Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, Global Biofuel Alliance, and India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, both of which were launched during the G20 summit in India. In the meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy, the two Prime Ministers are expected to review the entire gamut of bilateral ties and give directions for next steps. Other bilateral meetings between Honorable Prime Minister and the other world leaders present at the G7 summit are being scheduled. We will keep you posted as and when they concretized and the agenda therein. I would stop here and be happy to take some questions. Thank you very much.
We open the floor for questions, and please be mindful that your questions should be focused on G7 summit. With that, Manas.
Foreign Secretary, this is Manas Pratim for PTI. The G7 is expected to focus largely on the conflict in Ukraine. Is India and Prime Minister Modi is expected to, again reaffirm India's position and then kind of articulate what India wants G7 to, do to just diffuse the crisis in Ukraine?
Nainima from ABP Live. Just want to understand, I'm sure Prime Minister Modi will also be asked what will be India's participation in the Global Peace Summit. What will be the response if there is an update on that? Thank you.
फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी प्रणय उपाध्याय जी न्यूज से मेरा सवाल इस चीज़ को लेकर है कि यूक्रेन के राष्ट्रपति व्लादिमीर ज़ेलेंस्की भी एक्सपेक्टेड हैं इटली के अंदर, तो क्या यूक्रेन की तरफ से प्रधानमंत्री मोदी से मुलाकात की कोई अनुरोध मिला है? और दूसरा, चुनाव जीतने के बाद और भारत की लोकतंत्र की इस जीत के बाद में अब जब प्रधानमंत्री वहां पर मौजूद होंगे तो किन मुद्दों पर प्राथमिकता के साथ भारत अपनी बात वहां पर रखेगा, अगर आप उन्हें भारत के फोकल पॉइंट्स को एड्रेस कर सकें?
Siddhant from WION. My question was similar to what Pranay sir asked. I mean, what will be the focus of Prime Minister at the summit, since this is his first visit abroad in the third term?
Foreign Secretary, you spoke about the importance of AI in the G7 agenda this time. What kind of a framework or messaging on AI would the G7 come up with? And what are we going to the G7 in Italy with our proposal on artificial intelligence?
Foreign Secretary, I'm Sahil from ANI. What would be the issues of Global South that PM Modi likely to address in this year's G7 summit?
सीधा प्रसारण आप विदेश मंत्रालय की प्रेस वार्ता का देख रहे थे। विनय मोहन क्वात्रा जो विदेश सचिव हैं वो प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहे थे और खासतौर पर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी की जो इटली यात्रा होने वाली है, जिसमें कि G7 शिखर सम्मेलन में प्रधानमंत्री हिस्सा लेने वाले हैं। पदभार ग्रहण करने के बाद, तीसरी बार पदभार ग्रहण करने के बाद प्रधानमंत्री की ये पहली विदेश यात्रा होगी जब वो इटली जाएंगे G7 शिखर सम्मेलन में हिस्सा लेने के लिए। ये 13 जून से लेकर 15 जून तक इस सम्मेलन का आयोजन हो रहा है।